Welcome to the Tank Podcast. In this week's episode, Artistic Director of Frieze London, Eva Langret, discusses curation as storytelling and being at the service of the artist.
I think the key to keeping Frieze London exciting and appealing is really making sure that the fair fills its purpose as a sort of manifestation of a wider ecosystem. So this is a moment where we gather just under 150 galleries. This is a moment where artists get together and show work. This is a moment where we gather curators, institutions, brands, the general public. And I would say that it also goes beyond the fair, actually, and what's happening in the tent, in that this is a moment where we have around like 90,000 visitors coming to Frieze London and Frieze Masters over the course of 5 days. And so it's also about, making sure that London is shining as a destination. So, it's the fair, but it's also all the galleries and the exhibitions that they're organizing during Frieze Week. It's all the museum shows that are happening around town. And so all of this needs to work together in order for the fair to be exciting and successful and relevant. The art fair calendar is busy, and it's getting busier every year, and that actually excites me, because there's a sense of, a new art fair popping up is a new scene that's bubbling, and it's a new place where we can all go and discover new artists, new galleries. So that sense of constant renewal is something that really excites me. Yeah. I think there's been several moments in my career where my perspective shifted. I think there was, the first part of my career was very London focused. And I started, early on, thinking about how historically the art world maybe sometimes has excluded certain artists and certain practitioners. So that's a sort of shift that happened in my career earlier on. So thinking about, those that are canonized and those artists that are not, and how we do something about this as curators and, narrators and, at the service of artists, and how we can, help address that. And then there was another moment where I started to work in a much more global way. After being quite, London orientated, there was a time when, all of a sudden I started working with an organization whose focus was very global. And that really changed my perspective also in terms of thinking about, the many different art worlds that are happening at the same time, the many different art histories that are being written at any one time, and how one should encompass this in their work and their thinking. So there are many different types of spaces, for instance, that we work on at the fair. So there is the tent, and but within the tent there are spaces that are designed for galleries first and foremost. So thinking a lot about lighting and creating spaces where art can be seen and enjoyed. So those spaces, we think a lot about the interaction between visitor and artwork. And then there might be other spaces where the purpose is slightly different. It might be a restaurant, and then the question there is a different one. It's how do you create a space that might feel where people want to gather and have a good time, and then we design also auditoriums, and then the considerations around this are again different considerations. And we also run an outdoor sculpture park, and there the consideration is the relationship between artwork, nature, and the wider public. So I think because of the nature of the fair and it being so multifaceted, for every kind of space that we design, then there's a different sort of audience, artwork, and design, I guess, configuration. I see curating as being at the service of an artist or several artists, and being a conduit, if you want, or helping facilitate the exchange of their message to the widest possible audience. I think that's the sort of, that's how I see it. I think at the fair, there's a sense of discovery, and that's something that we think a lot about, when we're thinking about how the audience will experience being in the tent. There are so many galleries, there's so many artworks to be discovered, and I think we always try to think about, yes, that sense of, marveling at an artwork and maybe coming across something, an artist or a gallery that maybe you were not so familiar with before. And I think when that happens is also a moment where we feel that the fair has been a success. It's a career builder, and the fair provides many opportunities for artists to make a living, and galleries also to create revenue, which sustains their businesses. But not only that, I think, for many artists who show at Frieze, it could also be an opportunity to meet a curator who then, opens up exhibitions opportunities. And, we also as an organization want to foster those kind of opportunities for artists. So we collaborate with lots of institutions. So it's really thinking about, the many ways in which artists and galleries benefit of being in the tent, and making sure that we provide that. But also simply being in amongst ourselves as a community sometimes feels like, a moment of joy and something to be celebrated. So that's also an important part, I think, of, what the fair does.
To hear more podcasts from Tank, you can subscribe on all major podcast platforms or follow us on SoundCloud. The theme music for this podcast is by Himera.